latest podcast, The Heidelcast.
It's a Heidel minicast. And now, Scott Clark.
Myself, Guerrilla, and the Idiot Greek Chorus.
If the Heidelcast helps you, or you help us keep it going, please make the coffer clink by clicking on the PayPal link or by sending a check to Heidelberg Reformation Association, 1637 East Valley Parkway, number 391, Escondido, California, 92027.
May I ask you to help us with a little house cleaning? We have had a huge surge in subscriptions to the Heidel blog and specifically to the newsletter. Some people also subscribe via WordPress, but that's a whole different process. So what happens is you go to heidelblog.net, and in any post or on the front page, you can type in your email address and hit go, and then automatically you will get a daily email from us giving you a rundown of what's on the Heidel blog for that day. And it's surged by the thousands. And what happens is every time we add a subscription, if we reach a certain point, the company that provides this service for which we pay, our donors pay, charges us. And so our costs have gone up dramatically because of the huge number of new subscribers. And that's fine. We're excited about that. But can you check to see that you're actually opening these emails? Because if people subscribe and then they don't open, well, then our donors are paying to send a newsletter to someone who's not actually reading it. So we've been trying to clean up that list, I guess, make it accurate, make sure that everybody is getting it, is reading it. We're trying to be good stewards of the gifts that our donors have given us. We really appreciate your help with this. Thank you.
The Heidelcast.
Myself. This is one of these words that people use because they think it sounds better than me. Grammar Girl, whose site and whose podcast and posts I wasn't able to find, so I don't know to where she has gone. And so I don't have a link for you, but she was one of the people who helped me think through questions of grammar going back to the early 2000s. Anyway, sometime back, she had a post or a podcast addressing this problem, and I've noticed it myself. A listener to her podcast complained to her about the substitution of myself for me. It's please contact me, not please contact myself. The word myself is a pronoun, but it is a particular kind of pronoun. It is a reflexive pronoun, and it's used to intensify the subject, as I've already shown in the example I gave you. Well, it's also used to refer to the subject later in the sentence. And in this case, Grammar Girl gave this example, and I'm quoting her. I see myself playing marimbas. Myself is appropriate here because the subject is the same as the object.
Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Clark.
The Heidelcast.
I also want to talk to you in this episode about the difference between Guerrilla and Gorilla in the Idiot Greek Chorus. So this is a series that we're calling Grammar Guerrilla, Guerrilla. And it sounds like it's a homophone for another word that's spelled differently, Gorilla. So if I were really exaggerating the pronunciation, I would say, and if I had Spanish, it probably would be even clearer, but I could say Guerrilla and Gorilla. And so I'm going to do that in this episode just to make the difference clear. But normally when we pronounce them, we say gorilla and gorilla. They come out the same way. In 2006, the film Idiocracy was released. And since it came out almost 20 years ago, I have only seen portions. I've tried to watch it multiple times. I might even own it. I don't know. I sometimes still collect DVDs and Blu-rays just because who knows what's going to happen to, streaming and all of that. At any rate, I have tried and I just can't watch it. I can't finish it. I can't get very far. Part of it is I'm just not a huge fan of the genre comedy of errors. It's difficult for me to watch, for example, Seinfeld, mainly because of the George Costanza character. Jason Alexander did a brilliant job of making Costanza utterly disagreeable. I just don't like George. I have colleagues, my dear friends, Scott McDermott and Harrison Perkins have been trying to get me to watch The Office, the American version of The Office. They love it, and they're always quoting it to me. And of course, because I haven't seen it, I don't get it. And so they say, well, you need to watch that. And I'll try, but it's always, again, seemed to me to be one of those series that belongs to the comedy of errors, and it's just hard to watch. But be that as it may, evidence seems to be mounting that the film Idiocracy was prophetic. And maybe I should just buckle down and watch the whole thing, but we'll see. I don't know. If I'm not taking a test, it's sometimes hard to persevere through these things. And it seems like it hasn't taken 5 centuries for the idiocrats to assume power. I call this feature on the Heidel blog and the Heidelcast Grammar Guerrilla, in part because gorilla is a homophone for gorilla. As I've mentioned, they tend to sound the same when we pronounce them ordinarily, unless we're really emphasizing the difference between the two words, or unless somebody really has Spanish, I guess. It might come out even more distinctly then. But ordinarily, we don't really distinguish between them in English speech. A grammar gorilla would be a silly thing. A grammar gorilla is a very useful thing indeed. A guerrilla is an irregular, that is, someone not in a standing army, paramilitary resistance fighter. The Heidel blog is conducting a guerrilla war against bad theology, bad history, and bad grammar. A gorilla, however, is a great ape. The gorilla exhibit at the San Diego Wild Safari is one of my favorites. And frankly, I never expected that I would have to explain the difference, but apparently I was wrong. Again, Doug Adler, a tennis commentator, was fired by ESPN, I think in 2016 or 2017, something like that, for describing Venus Williams, who's a female African-American tennis player. So he's describing her charging the net and winning a point. He described it as a gorilla effect. And the commentator, Adler, was referring to the suddenness of the act and its decisive effect during the match. It's true, as I've been saying, that the words gorilla and gorilla are homophones, that is, they sound the same ordinarily when we pronounce them, but it's also true that there's no such expression as a gorilla effect or gorilla tennis, nor is it clear what those would signify. Gorilla tennis is an expression in tennis, however. In 2012, Sports Illustrated ran a story on gorilla tennis. In 2004, the New York Times itself published the expression gorilla tennis. A tennis reporter for the New York Times, a stringer, as it turns out, I was doing a little reading on this, has illustrated for us how quickly the idiocracy has ascended. On Twitter, he denounced Adler as a racist for using the word gorilla in connection with Williams. I didn't see or hear the broadcast. Watching tennis on television is a great way to take a nap. But I'm confident that had I heard it, ESPN, I scrubbed the video and the audio from their site, I would not have assumed that Adler was comparing a human to an animal. Adler was, in effect, being called a racist, and Adler sued to clear his name. More about that in a moment. The idiocy here is that the New York Times stringer immediately, as is evident in his tweet, assumed that Adler was referring to animals rather than to a class of warriors. The latter category, warriors, never seemed to have occurred to him, and he wasn't alone. This is really the big point here. The social media echo chamber resounded with virtue signaling, posturing on social media to let everyone know how socially conscious one is. I'm sorry for Adler, and apparently he still hasn't gotten his job back and probably won't. ESPN settled with Adler in 2019, but still, I imagine people just assume that he was intending some sort of racist slur. But in a way, except for the damage it's done to Adler, it's useful that this episode happened because it illustrates an important truth. and that this is the reason I'm doing this episode, or one of the reasons I'm doing this episode. The people who form our culture, the elites, and I really want you to hear me about this. I'm going to explain this. The people who form our culture, the elites, are not special. They think of themselves as being special. They want you to think of them as being special, but they aren't. Over the years, I've had some, not a lot, but some opportunity to rub shoulders with influential culture makers, and some of them you know, and some of them you don't. And most of them are just like you and like me. Most of them are not from elite families and private prep schools, but some, maybe most of them, want you to think that they are. The truth is that they are frustrated with their middle America upbringing. And just like Sally Field, as Michael Medved pointed out years ago brilliantly, I think, they want to be accepted by those whom they regard as their social betters.
And I can't deny the fact that you like me. Right now, you like me.
Medved appealed to that episode at the Oscars, and I don't remember when that was, to illustrate why films that don't do well get made. In other words, why doesn't Hollywood make films that make money? Family films always make money. By the way, as it turns out, apparently horror films always make money, or pretty much always make money, but instead they make films that don't make money. They make films that any reasonable person would see are not going to be successful. And you wonder, well, why do they do that? Well, Medved explained this decades ago, because this is a way of gaining acceptance within the culture of Hollywood. So as it turns out, nothing has really changed since high school.
Call or text now 760-618-1563.
There are the cool kids, the nerds, the athletes, etc. For those who cared, the cool kids determined what was socially acceptable. But the truth is, the cool kids were just as uncertain about themselves and their futures as the rest of us. They just dressed better, and they were maybe a little more skilled than others at hiding their insecurities. I know this as a pastor who's done a fair bit of counseling. And you can talk to psychologists and therapists, and they'll tell you the same things. Culturally, the cool kids in America live in Manhattan, D.C., and Hollywood. Having fled Des Moines for the big city, they now sneer at and lecture the rest of us for shopping at Walmart and for watching NASCAR. Just beneath their sneering and their lecturing, however, is the same nervous kid who doesn't know as much as he wants the rest of us to think that he knows. Sometimes, however, the reality peeks out from behind the curtain of cool. Is it not of the essence of intellectual superiority to know the difference between Guerrilla and Gorilla? Clearly, however, the virtue signalers didn't know the difference. The Adler case is just another small piece of evidence that the many refugees from Des Moines who populate D.C., Manhattan, and Hollywood are really not more intelligent than the rest of us. It's just a cheap facade. So please bear this in mind when those refugees from Moline and Scottsbluff try to create the impression via social media or your favorite TV program that everyone who is anyone is transgender or gay, or that at least half the population of America is homosexual or transgender. It seems to me that the network that's pushing this the hardest is CBS, because they know their clientele, their viewers are older. They tend to skew older in the demographic, and it's almost like they're catechizing older viewers in the new reality that 50% of all police officers are gay or trans or something. The truth is that these shows are increasingly being written by illiterates who want nothing more than to shock their grandmother back home. The people writing our television programs have neither seen nor read Shakespeare. The days of serious writers making a few extra dollars writing for TV, well, those are long past. The days of real, craggy-faced journalists who knew how to write, those are gone. What you see on television is really all there is. There's no substance behind what you see. Our culture is being formed by the ill-educated who really don't know the difference between Guerrilla and Gorilla. Don't be intimidated. They live in Manhattan, in the district, and Hollywood, not because they are better than you, but because they repeat socially acceptable opinions in socially acceptable ways. Our culture is being formed by an idiot Greek chorus.
Thanks for listening. Tune in tomorrow for more from the Heidelcast, brought to you by HeidelbergReformationAssociation.org. Don't forget, when the coin in the coffer clinks, the cost of bandwidth shrinks. Copyright Heidelberg Reformation Association. All rights reserved. This is a Heidel Media production.
For this podcast, the Heidelcast.